Hey there, my name is Alden Vero, a freelance knight who once served in the border armies of the human kingdoms. That was before the endless skirmishes with orc tribes wore me down to nothing but scars and regrets. I left the service 2 years ago, tired of the blood and the blind hatred that came with every patrol. Now, I live alone in a simple wooden cabin on the outskirts of the Elder Glen Forest, a few miles from the town of Ravenmoor. It's a quiet life, hunting for food, mending my gear, and keeping an eye on the forest edges to ward off any stray beasts or bandits. The cabin isn't much. A single room with a hearth, a bedroll in the corner, and a small stable for my horse Thorn. I don't have family left. The war took my brother, and my parents faded long before that. Friends? A handful in town, but I keep to myself. Peace is what I crave now, not glory or gold. The forest suits me. Dense, ancient trees that whisper secrets, and a sense of isolation that feels like armor. That afternoon, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, promising rain before nightfall. I was out on my usual patrol along the forest's rim, not because anyone paid me to, but because old habits die hard. The borderlands are still tense, even with the fragile truce between humans and orcs holding for the past few years. Ravenmoor sits right on the edge, a mixed town where elves, dwarves, and humans mingle uneasily. But orcs? They're rare visitors, often met with suspicion, or worse. I rode Thorn slowly, my hand resting on the hilt of my sword, scanning the underbrush for signs of trouble. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a crow. As I approached Silverbrook, the narrow stream where locals fetched water or bathed in warmer months, I heard something off. Not the usual babble of water over rocks, but a splash, frantic, uneven. Then a muffled cry, like someone biting back panic. I dismounted quietly, tying Thorn to a low branch, and crept forward through the ferns. My heart picked up pace. Instincts from the war kicked in, reminding me that surprises in these woods rarely ended well. Peering through the foliage, I saw her. She was in the stream, submerged up to her shoulders in the chilly water, her green skin glistening under the fading light. An orc woman, no doubt, tall and broad-shouldered, with long black hair plastered to her back and small tusks peeking from her lower lip. Her eyes, a sharp emerald green, darted wildly around the banks. The shore was a mess, scattered rocks, a torn satchel spilling contents into the mud, and what looked like shreds of clothing caught on branches. No weapons in sight, no companions. She was alone, vulnerable, trying to shield herself with her arms crossed over her chest. Our eyes met for a split second, and her expression shifted from fear to desperation. She didn't lunge or threaten. Instead, she called out in a voice rough with urgency, laced with an accent from the northern clans. "They stole my clothes. Knight, please help me." The words hit me like a bolt. Stole her clothes? While she was bathing? It sounded absurd, but the panic in her voice was real. I scanned the area again. No sign of pursuers, but the tracks in the mud told a story. Multiple boot prints, human-sized, leading away from the stream. She had wounds too. Scrapes on her arms, a bruise forming on her cheek, and her legs seemed unsteady as she shifted in the current. No armor, no blade. She wasn't a warrior scouting for trouble. If anything, she looked like a traveler caught off guard. The fear in her eyes wasn't feigned. I'd seen enough deception on the battlefield to know the difference. I hesitated for a moment. Helping an orc. In these parts, that could brand me a sympathizer. Or worse. Memories flashed, orc raids on villages, comrades falling to their axes. But this wasn't war. This was a woman stripped of dignity, left exposed and humiliated. No one deserved that, orc or not. I turned my back to give her privacy, unclasping my cloak, a thick wool thing lined with fur for the border winters, and tossed it over my shoulder toward her. "Wrap yourself in that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll help you out, but stay calm." She caught the cloak with a splash, and I heard her fumbling to cover up. "Thank you," she whispered, her tone edged with relief and suspicion. I extended a hand behind me, still not looking, and felt her strong grip, calloused, like a laborer's. She was heavier than she looked. her frame solid with muscle, but she leaned on me as we climbed the slippery bank. Up close, her injuries were clearer, deep scratches on her calves from thorns or rough handling, and she winced with each step. "Who did this?" I asked, finally turning once she was wrapped securely. She shook her head, water dripping from her hair. 3 human men. They laughed, called me names, took everything and ran. Her voice broke slightly, but she held her chin high, pride flickering through the shame. I nodded, scanning the woods again. If those fools were still nearby, they might come back. Leaving her here wasn't an option. She could barely walk, and night was falling. "My cabin's not far," I said. "You can rest there until you're fit to travel. No strings." She eyed me warily but nodded. I helped her onto Thorn, mounting behind her to steady her as we rode. The forest grew darker, and my mind raced. What had I just done? Saved an innocent or invited trouble into my quiet life? I didn't know yet, but as the cabin came into view, one thing was clear. This orc woman's plea by the stream had just shattered my solitude. As we approached the cabin, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the leaves like distant arrows. Lyra clung to the saddle, her breathing shallow and ragged. I could feel her tension through the cloak, her body rigid, every muscle coiled as if expecting betrayal at any moment. Thorn snorted softly, sensing the unease, but he plodded on steadily through the dimming woods. My mind raced ahead. What was I doing? Bringing an orc into my home? The townsfolk in Ravenmoor already whispered about me, the broken knight who quit the fight. If word got out, this could turn ugly. But leaving her out there, exposed and injured, wasn't something I could stomach. War had taught me enough about cruelty. I didn't need to add to it. I helped her down from the horse once we reached the clearing. The cabin loomed ahead, its thatched roof sagging slightly under the weight of moss and thyme. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. I'd left a small fire banked before heading out. "This way," I muttered, supporting her arm as she limped toward the door. She was taller than most human women, her frame solid and imposing even in her weakened state, but she leaned on me without protest. Inside, the warmth hit us like a wall, the scent of pine logs and dried herbs filling the air. I guided her to the hearth, where a worn rug lay before the fire. "Sit here. I'll get you something dry." She lowered herself carefully, clutching the cloak tighter around her. Her eyes, those piercing green orbs, darted around the room, taking in the sparse furnishings. My sword rack by the door, a table cluttered with maps and tools, the single bedroll in the corner. No decorations, no luxuries, just the basics for a man who lived alone. I rummaged through a chest, pulling out an old tunic and breeches. Too small for her, but better than nothing. "These might not fit well, but they'll do until we can get your things back." I handed them over without looking, turning to stoke the fire. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now, though still laced with that northern orc accent, harsh consonants softened by a melodic undertone. She dressed quickly behind me, the rustle of fabric the only sound besides the crackling flames. When she spoke next, it was hesitant. "My name is Lyra. I don't belong to any of the local clans. I'm from the Northern Highlands, beyond the Frost Peaks." I nodded, glancing over once she was decent. The tunic hung loosely on her broad shoulders, the breeches rolled up at the ankles. Her skin was a deep olive green, marked with faint tribal tattoos along her arms, swirling patterns that spoke of heritage I didn't recognize. Small tusks protruded from her lower lip, polished and unadorned, unlike the battle-scarred ones I'd seen on orc warriors. She looked about my age, maybe a year or two younger, with a face that was striking in its intensity, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Alden Vero," I replied. "Former knight. Now just here." She sat straighter, wincing as she adjusted her leg. The scratches were ugly, red and inflamed, likely from thorns or rough grabs. "I was traveling alone," she began, her gaze fixed on the fire. "Heading south to find work in one of the mixed towns. Better opportunities than scraping by in the highlands. I stopped at the stream to wash off the road dust. It's been days since I had a proper rest. Then they came. 3 human men, young, laughing like it was a game. They saw me, started shouting insults. "Green beast! Filthy orc!" I tried to ignore them, but they grabbed my clothes from the bank, rifled through my satchel, and tossed half my things into the water. When I yelled, they just laughed harder, shoving me back in. They didn't touch me further, but they made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. Then they ran off with what was left. Her words hung in the air, heavy with humiliation. I clenched my jaw, a familiar anger stirring. The same one I'd felt on the battlefield when I'd seen innocents caught in the crossfire. War had painted orcs as monsters in my mind, savage raiders, relentless fighters. I'd lost count of the clashes, the friends buried because of orc axes. But this? This was no raid. This was petty cruelty, the kind weak men inflicted to feel strong. "Bastards," I muttered, fetching a cloth and basin of water from the corner. "Let me see those wounds. Infection sets in fast out here." She hesitated but extended her leg. As I cleaned the scratches gently, applying a salve from my kit, aloe and herbs I'd gathered myself, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. She wasn't what I'd expected. No snarling aggression, no demands. Just quiet resilience, her hands steady despite the pain. "Why help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice probing. "You're human. A knight, you said. You've probably fought my kind before." I paused, the cloth hovering over a particularly deep cut. She was right. I had. Flashes of memory, charging lines, the clash of steel, the screams. "I have," I admitted, "lost good men to orc blades. But that was war, not this. No one deserves to be stripped of their dignity like that. Orc or human, it's wrong." I met her eyes, seeing a flicker of surprise. "Besides, leaving you out there would have made me no better than those fools." She nodded slowly, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips, the first I'd seen. It softened her features, making her look less like a stranger and more like someone. In the North, we have a saying, "Kindness in the storm is remembered longer than victory in battle." "Thank you, Alden." The rain picked up outside, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. I bandaged her wounds as best I could, then prepared a simple meal. Stew from the morning's hunt, bread and dried fruit. We ate in silence mostly, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. She devoured her portion, clearly famished from the road. Afterward, I set up a pallet near the hearth for her, extra blankets and a pillow from my stores. "Sleep here, it's warmer." "I'll take the chair by the door," she protested weakly. "I don't want to impose—" "You're not," I cut in. "Rest. We'll figure out tomorrow in the morning." As she settled in, wrapping herself in the blankets, I took my post by the door, sword across my lap. The night deepened, the storm howling outside. I watched her breathing, even out into sleep, her face relaxed for the first time. Trust? Not yet. But something had shifted, a fragile bridge built on a single act of decency. I stayed awake, listening to the rain and the forest's whispers, wondering if this orc named Lyra was a fleeting guest, or the start of something that could upend my quiet life. For now, the trust was thin, like the first ice on a pond, but it held. And that was enough to keep me vigilant through the night. The morning after Lyra's arrival dawned crisp and clear, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Sunlight filtered through the cabin's small window, casting a warm glow on the hearth where she'd slept. I woke early, my back stiff from the chair, but I'd managed a few hours of rest. Lyra was already stirring, folding the blankets neatly as if to erase any trace of her presence. Her wounds looked better, less swollen, though she still favored her uninjured leg. We shared a quiet breakfast of porridge and tea, the silence between us less awkward now, more like two strangers testing the waters of uneasy alliance. "I need to head into Ravenmoor," I said, clearing the bowls. "Supplies are low, and I should check if those men are causing more trouble. You stay here. Rest. The door bars from inside. No one comes this way without reason." She nodded, but her eyes held a shadow of doubt. "Be careful. If they saw you with me." "They didn't," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure. Strapping on my sword belt and pulling on a fresh cloak, I stepped outside. Thorn was rested, and the ride to town was short, through winding paths lined with autumn-leaved trees that rustled in the breeze. Ravenmoor sprawled at the forest's edge, a cluster of stone and timber buildings, a central square with a market, and the looming shadow of the old watchtower from the war days. It was a melting pot, humans mostly, but dwarven smiths hammered in their forges, and elven traders hawked herbs from carts. Orcs? Seldom seen and never welcomed warmly. I tethered Thorn near the stables and made my way to the general store, keeping my head down. But whispers followed me like smoke. At the counter, old Harlan, the shopkeep, eyed me curiously as he weighed out flour and bandages. "Heard some talk, Alden," he muttered, leaning in. "Folks say you were out by Silverbrook yesterday. Something about an orc wandering too close. Bram and his lads were in here last night, laughing about teaching a green skin a lesson." My gut tightened, so word was spreading already. I paid for the goods without commenting, but as I stepped out, I caught more murmurs from a group of farmers by the well. "Varro's soft on the borders," one said. Probably why he quit the Knights. I ignored them, heading to the tavern next, the Blackthorn Inn, where gossip flowed freer than ale. Inside, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the scent of roasting meat. A few regulars nodded at me, but the atmosphere felt off. There, at a corner table, sat Bram, tall, broad-chested, with a smug grin and a mop of unruly brown hair. He was in his early 20s, son of the innkeeper, and known for stirring trouble with his cronies. Two of them flanked him, nursing mugs and chuckling. Bram spotted me immediately, his eyes lighting up with mock innocence. "Well, if it isn't the hero of the borders," he called, loud enough for the room to hear. "Out patrolling again? Hear you had an interesting find by the stream yesterday. Green and feisty, was she?" The tavern quieted a notch. I approached slowly, my hand resting casually on my sword hilt, not a threat, but a reminder. "What are you on about, Bram?" He leaned back, smirking. "Oh, nothing. Just a little fun with a stray orc. She was bathing like she owned the place. We relieved her of some burdens. Clothes, bag, to teach her boundaries. But word is you swooped in like some knight in tarnished armor. Brought her home? That's bold, even for you." His friend snickered, but I felt a cold rage building. "Fun? You mean harassment, stealing from a traveler, leaving her exposed. That's cowardice, not sport." Bram's smile faded, his face hardening. "She's an orc, Varro. They don't belong here. You, of all people, should know that. Weren't you fighting them not long ago? Or did you forget the raids, the blood?" "I haven't forgotten," I said evenly. "But the war's over. And what you did isn't justice. It's bullying. If I hear you've gone near my land or that stream again, we'll have more than words." The room tensed, a few patrons shifting uncomfortably. Bram stood, towering over the table, but he didn't advance. "Watch yourself, Knight. Folks might start thinking you're on the wrong side." He sat back down with a forced laugh, but the threat lingered. I turned and left, the door slamming behind me. Outside, the market buzzed, but I felt eyes on my back. Word was out. Someone had seen us riding back, or perhaps Bram's crew had followed at a distance. Riding home, my thoughts churned. The council in Ravenmoor, led by Elder Thornwood, a hardliner from the old days, hated anything that smelled of orc sympathy. If they caught wind of this, they could send patrols to escort Lyra out of town, or worse, stir up a mob. My reputation as a former knight might shield me for a bit, but harboring an orc? That could strip away what little respect I had left. Why risk it? She was a stranger, after all. But the image of her in the stream, vulnerable and pleading, stuck with me. War had shown me monsters on both sides. Not all orcs were raiders, just as not all humans were heroes. Back at the cabin, Lyra was waiting by the window, her posture alert. She relaxed slightly when she saw it was me. "You heard something?" she said, reading my face as I unloaded the supplies. I nodded, recounting the encounter with Bram and the rumors. Her expression darkened, fists clenching. "I should go, before this brings trouble to your door. I've caused enough." "No," I interrupted, firmer than I intended. "You're still healing. And running now would just prove them right, that orcs don't belong. If you leave, it's on your terms, not theirs. The words surprised even me. When had this shifted from temporary aid to defiance? But seeing her there, strong yet scarred by cruelty, stirred something protective. This wasn't just about her. It was about not letting bullies win. She searched my eyes, then nodded slowly. All right, but if they come, I won't hide. We spent the afternoon in uneasy quiet. I sharpened my blade. She mended her torn satchel with thread from my kit. As dusk fell, the forest grew still, too still. Then, around midnight, it started. Faint footsteps crunching leaves, low voices carrying on the wind. I grabbed my sword, motioning for Lyra to stay back. Peering through a crack in the shutter, I saw them. 3 figures with torches, skulking near the tree line. Bram's silhouette was unmistakable, flanked by his 2 friends, their faces twisted in drunken bravado. They weren't charging yet, just testing, laughing, whispering taunts. "Come out, orc lover," one called. My grip tightened on the hilt. This was it, the spark that could ignite everything. The flames in the hearth had died to embers, casting flickering shadows across the cabin's walls. Outside, the night was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of wind through the trees. I'd barred the door after dinner, but sleep eluded me. Lyra had retired to her pallet by the fire, her breathing steady and even. But I sat at the table, oiling my sword blade by lantern light. The encounter in town with Bram gnawed at me like a persistent itch. His words, "orc lover," echoed in my head, stirring old doubts. Was I a fool for this? Harboring her could cost me everything, my home, my fragile peace, maybe even my life if the council got involved. But every time I glanced at her sleeping form wrapped in my spare blanket, her face softened in repose, I pushed the thoughts aside. She wasn't a threat. She was just Lyra. The first sign of trouble came around midnight, a low murmur of voices, too deliberate to be the wind. I froze, lantern in hand, listening. Footsteps, heavy and careless, crunching on the gravel path leading to my door. 3 sets, by the sound of it. My pulse quickened. I set the lantern down quietly and gripped my sword. Lyra stirred, her eyes snapping open in the dim light. "What is it?" she whispered, already rising, her hand reaching for the fire poker as an improvised weapon. "Stay inside," I hissed, moving to the shuttered window. Peering through a crack, I saw them. Bram and his 2 cronies, torches in hand, their faces twisted in drunken malice. They weren't trying to be stealthy, arrogant, thinking the night and their numbers gave them the edge. Bram led, a club slung over his shoulder, his laughter carrying on the breeze. "Come on out, Vero," he bellowed, his voice slurred but sharp. "We know you've got that green bitch in there, keeping an orc as a pet. That's low, even for a washed-up knight." The insult hit like a slap, but it was the slur aimed at Lyra that ignited real fury. I unbarred the door and stepped out, sword drawn but held low, not aggressive yet, but ready. The cool night air bit at my skin, the torchlight dancing in their eyes like fevered gleams. "This is my land, Bram," I said, voice steady. "Turn around and go home. Whatever grudge you have ends here." He laughed, a harsh bark that echoed through the trees. His friends flanked him, one holding a pitchfork, the other a crude axe. Tools turned weapons. They reeked of ale, their steps unsteady, but their intent clear. "Grudge? Nah, this is justice. Orcs don't belong in Ravenmoor. And you, playing house with one, makes you a traitor." He spat on the ground, gesturing wildly. "We saw her at the stream, filthy thing thinking she could just waltz through our territory. We taught her a lesson then. Time to finish it." My grip tightened on the hilt, memories of the war flashing, similar taunts from both sides leading to senseless blood. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was my home. "You humiliated a traveler. That's not justice. That's cowardice. Leave now, or I'll make this official with the patrols." Bram's face contorted, and he took a step forward, crossing the invisible line of my property. "Official? You're done in this town, Vero. We'll drag that beast out and—" The door creaked open behind me. Lyra stepped out, the fire poker in her hand. her posture straight despite the limp. She wasn't hiding. Her green eyes blazed with defiance, tusks glinting in the torchlight. "I'm no beast," she said, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. "And I'm here because I choose to be, not as anyone's pet. Touch me, and you'll regret it." The men faltered for a second, surprised by her boldness. Bram recovered first, sneering. "Look at that." The orc talks back. Cute. "But choices. Orcs don't get choices here." He lunged forward, club raised, his friends following with shouts. Time slowed. I moved instinctively, years of training kicking in. I parried Bram's swing with my sword, the clash of wood on steel ringing out. He was strong but sloppy, drunk and overconfident. I shoved him back, spinning to block the pitchfork from his friend. The man yelped as I disarmed him with a swift twist, the tool clattering to the ground. Lyra wasn't idle. She swung the poker at the third assailant, catching him on the arm with a solid thunk. He howled, dropping his axe and staggering back. "Enough!" I roared, pressing my advantage. Bram came at me again, wild and furious. I sidestepped, tripping him with a boot to the ankle. He sprawled in the dirt, torch rolling away and sputtering in a puddle. His face was a mask of rage as he scrambled up, but blood trickled from a cut on his brow where he'd hit a rock. "You're done," I said, sword point leveled at his chest. "Cross this line again, and it's an attack on my home. The council won't side with drunks harassing a guest." Lyra stood beside me now, her presence a solid wall of resolve. The men hesitated, glancing at each other. The one she'd hit cradled his arm, whimpering. Bram spat blood, glaring at us. "This ain't over, Vero. We'll be back. With more. And that orc? She'll wish she'd stayed in her frozen hell." They backed away, torches bobbing as they retreated into the woods, their threats fading into curses. I watched until they were gone, the forest swallowing their light. My arm throbbed, a shallow gash from the axe's glancing blow, but adrenaline masked the pain. Turning, I saw Lyra lower the poker, her hands trembling now that the fight was over. Not from fear, I realized, but from the raw humiliation of it all. Being called a beast, a pet, reminded of the stream incident in front of strangers. Her eyes glistened in the dim light, but she blinked it away, jaw set. "Lyra," I started, sheathing my sword. "Are you—" She shook her head, voice cracking just a fraction. "Do you regret it now? Helping me? This is what comes with it. The looks, the fights. I'm an orc in human lands. It'll always bring trouble." I stepped closer, the space between us feeling smaller than ever. The night air was cold, but her presence radiated a warmth that cut through it. "No," I said firmly, meeting her gaze. "I don't regret it. Those men are the problem, not you. You've done nothing wrong except exist, and if standing against that means trouble, then let it come." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, we stood there, the world narrowing to just us, the scent of rain-soaked earth, the distant rustle of leaves, the faint crackle of the dying fire inside. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand, strong, calloused from whatever life she'd led in the north, brushing mine. It was tentative, a touch that spoke volumes, gratitude, vulnerability, perhaps the spark of something more. Her fingers intertwined with mine briefly, warm against my chilled skin. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, not just an orc." I squeezed her hand gently, my heart pounding in a way battles never caused. "You're welcome, Lyra." We lingered there, the contact electric but innocent, a bridge built in the aftermath of violence. As we finally went inside, barring the door again, I knew Bram's threat was real. They'd return, maybe with reinforcements. The council might get involved. Rumors could spread like wildfire, but in that moment, with her by my side, the risk felt worth it. Trouble was brewing, but so was something else. Something fragile, unexpected, and undeniably real. The dawn light crept through the cabin's window, pale and hesitant, as if the sun itself was wary after last night's chaos. My arm throbbed where the axe's edge had grazed it, a shallow cut I'd bandaged hastily before collapsing into fitful sleep. Lyra was already up, boiling water over the rekindled fire, her movements deliberate despite the limp. She looked different in the morning light, stronger, the bruises on her face fading to shadows, her green skin catching a subtle glow. We hadn't spoken much after the fight. The adrenaline had drained us both, leaving only exhaustion and that lingering touch of hands. "Morning," I said, rubbing my eyes as I sat up. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and herbs from the salve she'd applied to my wound. Outside, the forest was alive with birdsong, a stark contrast to the threats that had echoed in the dark. She handed me a mug of tea, her fingers brushing mine again. Intentional this time, or so it felt. "You fought for me," she said quietly. "No one's done that before. Not without expecting something in return." I sipped the bitter brew, meeting her gaze. "I fought for what's right. You didn't ask for this mess." The town was buzzing. I knew it even before stepping out. Rumors spread fast in Ravenmoor. By now, Bram's version of events would be twisted into something damning. The former knight harboring an orc, fighting his own kind. I weighed my options over breakfast. Reporting to the patrols could backfire. Elder Thornwood might see it as weakness, or worse, use it to rally against me. But ignoring it invited more trouble. "I need to handle this," I told her. "Go into town, talk to the captain of the guard. Make it official before Bram spins his lies." Lyra set her mug down, her expression resolute. "I'm coming with you." I shook my head. "It's risky. The stares, the whispers." "No more running," she interrupted, her voice firm. "I've spent years moving from place to place, hiding who I am. If I leave now, it's because I choose, not because they force me. And if I stay, I want to try. Here, in Ravenmoor, with people who might see beyond the green." Her words hit me hard. Stay? The thought sent a mix of fear and warmth through me. Fear of the backlash, the isolation it could bring. Warmth from the possibility. The image of her here, not as a guest, but as something more. I nodded slowly. "All right, together then." We prepared quickly. I donned my old knight's tabard, the faded emblem a reminder of authority I rarely invoked. Lyra borrowed another tunic, her tribal tattoos peeking from the sleeves, a mark of her heritage she wore without shame. The ride into town was tense. Thorn plodded along the path, the air crisp with the scent of wet earth from last night's dew. Lyra sat behind me, her hands lightly on my waist, not clinging, but present. "What if they turn on you?" she asked softly. "Then we face it," I replied. "I've faced worse." Ravenmoor stirred as we arrived. The market square alive with vendors hawking bread and trinkets, dwarves arguing over ore prices, a few elves browsing silks. Heads turned immediately. Whispers rippled like wind through grass. "Varro with an orc? What's he thinking?" We dismounted near the watchtower where Captain Harlan, a grizzled veteran I'd served with, held court. Bram was there too, nursing his bruised ego with a group of sympathizers, his eye black from the fall. Harlan spotted us, his brow furrowing. "Alden, what's this?" I explained succinctly. "The incident at the stream, the nighttime assault on my property." Lyra stood tall beside me, adding her account in a clear voice. No embellishments, just facts. Bram interrupted, sputtering accusations. "She's a spy, and he's protecting her." Harlan silenced him with a glare. "Assault on a knight's land? That's a crime, boy. And Varro's word carries weight here. More than your drunken tales." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. My reputation as a border hero still held sway. Not everyone bought into the old hatreds. Bram backed down, slinking away with muttered threats, but the captain's warning to him was public. "Cause more trouble, and you'll face the stocks." As we walked through the market afterward, buying fresh bandages and food, the stares continued, but no one confronted us. A few even offered nods. An elven herbalist slipped Lyra a pouch of healing leaves, murmuring, "Borders change. People should too." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a crack in the wall. Lyra's hand found mine briefly as we left, a squeeze of thanks. Back at the cabin that evening, the tension eased like a held breath released. We shared a meal by the fire, the air filled with the aroma of stew and fresh bread. Lyra didn't retreat to her pallet early. Instead, she sat closer, our knees almost touching. The distance between us had shrunk, not just physically, but in the way we spoke, the glances that lingered. "This time," she said softly, staring into the flames, "I wasn't robbed of my clothes or my choices. For the first time, I feel like I have one. To stay, to fight for a place here." I looked at her, the firelight dancing in her green eyes, softening the edges of her tusks and tattoos. "And I choose to stand with you," I replied, "whatever comes." She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes, and leaned her head on my shoulder, just for a moment, but it felt like a promise. No declarations of love, no rushed embraces, just the quiet building of something new, born from a plea by a stream and forged in shared trials. The world outside might still rumble with prejudice, Bram's threats lingering like storm clouds, but inside these walls, we'd carved out a fragile peace. And for now, that was our choice, together,